Right. So today, we're going to dive into something pretty epic.
Yeah.
We're tackling James Joyce's Ulysses, a book that's pretty legendary for being, well, a real challenge.
It is fascinating how one book can have, like, such a mythical place in literature, you know? Even after a century, Ulysses still has this reputation as, like, the book to conquer, you know what I mean?
It's daunting.
Yeah.
But here's the thing.
Yeah.
You don't need to be a Joyce scholar to appreciate it. Our mission today is to give you the tools to navigate this complex world. Think of it like a map and compass for your first expedition into Joyce's Dublin.
Yeah. We'll break it down. We'll help you understand the structure, you know, meet the main characters.
Right.
And grasp, like, the big themes that make Ulysses so significant.
Exactly.
Oh.
So no pressure to become Joyce experts overnight. By the end of this deep dive, you'll be able to at least hold your own at a cocktail party.
At least, yeah.
Or impress that lit professor who always intimidated you.
Yeah. That's the goal. And a good starting point is to remember that Ulysses mirrors Homer's epic poem, the Odyssey. It takes place on a single day, June 16th, 1904, in Dublin, and follows the journey of Leopold Bloom, our modern-day Ulysses.
Okay, so that's helpful. How closely does Joyce actually follow the Odyssey? Is it like a scene-by-scene remake, or is it more subtle than that?
It's more like an intricate kind of weaving of parallels, right? Each episode in Ulysses has a corresponding chapter in the Odyssey.
Okay.
But Joyce goes beyond, you know, simple plot mirroring. He uses that Homeric structure to explore these deep psychological and thematic connections. For example, you know, just as Odysseus faces trials and temptations on his journey home, Bloom encounters challenges that reveal his own inner conflicts and desires.
I see. So it's about using the Odyssey as a framework to dive into the complexities of modern life, and the human experience.
Yeah. Now, the book is divided into three main parts, like the Telemachus, the Odyssey, and the Gnostus. Just like in Homer's epic, each part has a distinct purpose in Bloom's journey.
So hold on. Before we even get to Bloom, we have this whole section devoted to Stephen Dedalus.
Right.
What's Joyce doing starting the book this way? Why not jump right into?
That's a great question.
Bloom's Day.
And it gets to the heart of Joyce's brilliance, right? By introducing Stephen first, Joyce sets up this really powerful contrast with Bloom.
Okay.
Stephen, our Telemachus figure, represents that intellectual, artistic side of Dublin, but he's also lost, yearning for a father figure.
And that yearning mirrors Telemachus searching for Odysseus, right?
Exactly. So in episode 1, Telemachus, we meet Stephen at the Martello Tower, where he lives with Buck Mulligan, this cynical medical student. Their dynamic is fascinating. Mulligan's constantly mocking Stephen's intellectualism and his kind of religious angst, while Stephen is grappling with his guilt over his mother's death and his rejection of Catholicism.
So right away, we see these themes of religion, guilt, and that clash between intellectualism and like a more earthly, cynical
Absolutely.
The world.
Yes, and that tension builds throughout those early episodes. Episode 2, Nestor, takes us to the school where Stephen teaches history.
Okay.
And he encounters Mr. Deasy, the headmaster, who represents, like, this rigid, outdated form of authority.
From what I've read, that episode also touches on anti-Semitism, which seems like an important theme considering Bloom is Jewish.
Yes.
Is Joyce subtly foreshadowing the prejudice that Bloom will face later on?
Absolutely. Stephen's encounter with Deasy's narrow-mindedness sets the stage for the bigotry and the isolation that Bloom experiences later. It shows how even in, like, seemingly intellectual circles, these deeply ingrained prejudices persist.
And then comes episode 3, Proteus, which I hear is completely different.
Right.
Because, like, Joyce suddenly changes the rules of the game.
Proteus is where Joyce really starts to flex his experimental muscles. He plunges us into Stephen's stream of consciousness as he walks along Sandymount Strand. And the language becomes really dense, almost poetic, reflecting the inner workings of Stephen's mind as he's walking.
So instead of traditional dialogue and descriptions, we get this, like, torrent of thoughts and impressions and philosophical musings.
Yes, and it's crucial to understand what Joyce is doing here, right? Proteus isn't just a stylistic experiment. It's a deliberate attempt to capture the fluidity of human perception, you know, the way our thoughts and emotions are constantly shifting, influenced by memories, by sensations, by the world around us.
Sounds like Proteus really prepares us for the wild ride that's about to come in the rest of Ulysses. We still haven't met Bloom, though.
Right.
Where does he fit into all of this? Is he like Stephen, or is he a completely different animal?
He's a completely different animal. And that's the point. Remember that contrast we talked about? It's like crucial to understanding the dynamic between these two characters and the broader themes of the novel.
Okay, give me the rundown on Leopold Bloom.
Right.
Who is this guy and why should we care about him?
Bloom is like the heart and soul of Ulysses.
Okay.
He's an ordinary man, a Jewish advertising canvasser in Dublin. But Joyce elevates him to these epic proportions.
Okay.
You know, he's our Ulysses, navigating those trials and temptations of modern life, just as Odysseus faced, mythical monsters and seductive sirens.
But isn't it strange that our hero is like just an average guy?
Right.
What makes Bloom so compelling?
His very ordinariness is what makes him extraordinary, right? Joyce shows us that even in those mundane routines of daily life, there's this depth of experience, or a richness of thought and emotion that's worthy of epic treatment. And Bloom, with his curiosity, his compassion, his capacity for love, he embodies that idea.
I like that. So we meet Bloom in episode 4, Calypso, and it sounds like a world away from Stephen's intellectual brooding.
Yeah.
What's Bloom up to in this first glimpse we get of him?
So we find Bloom in his kitchen, making breakfast. It's a simple act, but Joyce uses it to establish Bloom's connection to the physical world, to his senses, right? He's thinking about the food he's preparing, the smells, even his cat. It's the stark contrast to Stephen's more abstract intellectual concerns.
It sounds almost cozy, domestic. But I know there's trouble brewing beneath the surface, right? Didn't you mention something about Bloom suspecting his wife's infidelity?
Yes, that shadow hangs over Bloom throughout the day. He finds a letter from his wife, Molly's lover, Blazes Boylan.
Right.
But he chooses not to confront it directly. Instead, he carries that pain with him, internalizing it as he goes about his day.
That's interesting. He doesn't lash out or seek revenge like you might expect from a betrayed husband in a more classic novel.
Exactly. Bloom is more introspective, right? He observes, he reflects, he absorbs the world around him, including his own suffering. And that makes him a deeply sympathetic character, someone we can relate to even in his flawed humanity.
Okay, so from this quiet, somewhat melancholic beginning, Bloom sets out into the city, and his day unfolds like this modern-day Odyssey.
Yes.
With each episode mirroring an adventure from Homer's epic. But instead of Cyclops and sirens, Bloom encounters the everyday challenges and encounters of Dublin life.
Precisely. He attends a funeral in episode 6, Hades, where his thoughts kind of drift towards mortality, echoing Odysseus's journey to the underworld. It's a moment where Bloom confronts the inevitability of death, a theme that's going to resurface throughout his journey.
And we also see him navigate social and political tensions. I'm thinking of episode 12, Cyclops, which takes place in a pub filled with fiercely nationalistic Irishmen. That must be a tense situation for Bloom, being Jewish in such a charged environment.
Cyclops is a pivotal episode. It exposes the prejudice and xenophobia that Bloom faces as an outsider, even in his own city. He's verbally attacked, mocked for his religion and his perceived lack of Irishness. It's a stark reminder that even in, seemingly ordinary settings, intolerance can rear its ugly head.
And Joyce doesn't shy away from portraying the ugliness of that bigotry.
Not at all. In fact, he uses a very biased, unreliable narrator for that episode.
Interesting.
Reflecting the narrow-mindedness and aggression of the nationalists. It's a brilliant way to show how prejudice distorts perception and fuels hatred.
Okay, so we've talked about Bloom's encounters with death and prejudice, but what about his inner life, like his emotional struggles? Where did those come to the forefront?
Episode 15, Circe, is where Bloom's psychological journey reaches its climax. It's the most hallucinatory, surreal episode in the entire novel, taking place in Nighttown, Dublin's red light district. Imagine it as a descent into the subconscious, a theatrical dreamscape where Bloom's deepest anxieties and desires are laid bare.
So it's not just about the external events of his day. It's about the inner turmoil, the hidden fears and fantasies that drive his actions.
Exactly. Bloom confronts his guilt over his perceived failures as a husband and father. His insecurities about his masculinity and his deepest desires. It's all there, played out in this fantastical, sometimes disturbing, but ultimately revealing episode.
And isn't this also where Bloom finally encounters Stephen?
Yes.
I know their paths cross at some point.
Their meeting in Circe is pivotal, right? It's
Okay.
like this moment of recognition, a glimpse of potential connection between these two seemingly disparate characters. Bloom, who has lost his own son, Rudy,
Wow.
sees a reflection of that loss in Stephen, who's also struggling with father figures and his place in the world.
So Bloom's compassion and, like, paternal instincts are awakened.
Yeah.
He sees someone in need and feels compelled to help, even though Stephen is initially resistant to his overtures.
It's the beginning of their nostos, their journey back home, both literally and metaphorically. Circe is the turning point, that moment of catharsis that sets them on this new path.
Okay, so we've journeyed with Bloom through, like, the highs and lows of his day, from the mundane to the surreal,
Right.
from the tenderness of breakfast with his cat to the dark confrontation with prejudice in a Dublin pub.
Yeah.
And we've seen him cross paths with Stephen, a young man who seems to mirror his own lost son.
And that intersection sets the stage for the final part of Ulysses,
Okay.
where the themes of homecoming, reconciliation, and the search for meaning take center stage.
I'm ready to explore that final part. What happens to Bloom and Stephen? Do they find what they're looking for?
That's what we'll uncover as we delve into the Nostos, the final act of Ulysses, where Joyce brings his epic journey to a close.
All right, so we're entering the final stretch of Ulysses now, the Nostos. What does that word even mean? I'm guessing it's not just about, like, physically coming home.
Yeah, you're right. Nostos is a Greek word that encompasses more than just a physical return. It kind of implies a homecoming on multiple levels, like a return to a sense of belonging, a reconciliation with the past, and a deeper understanding of oneself.
So it's about Bloom and Stephen finding their way back to some kind of inner peace or resolution after all the chaos and turmoil they've experienced.
Exactly. And Joyce, being Joyce, plays with this concept in fascinating ways. In episode 16, Eumaeus, Bloom takes Stephen to a cabman shelter after their hallucinatory adventures in Nighttown. And the atmosphere is one of exhaustion, you know, both physical and emotional.
From what I've heard, even the language in this episode reflects that exhaustion.
Yes.
It's like Joyce wants us to feel the weight of the day pressing down on these characters.
It's true. The style is deliberately slow, rambling, mimicking the fatigue and the kind of mental fog of Bloom and Stephen. Bloom tries to offer Stephen guidance, almost like a father figure, but Stephen is still lost in his own thoughts, resistant to connection.
There's that father-son dynamic again.
Yeah.
But it seems even more poignant now, considering all they've been through together.
Right.
And then, in episode 17, Ithaca, Bloom returns home alone.
Right.
Stephen has gone off on his own path, still searching.
Yeah.
This episode is like a complete stylistic shift, almost like Joyce is throwing us another curveball.
Yeah.
What happens in Ithaca? Does Bloom find any sense of peace or closure back in his own house?
So Joyce presents Ithaca as a series of questions and answers, almost like a scientific report, right?
Interesting.
It's incredibly precise, almost clinical in its descriptions. Even the most mundane details of Bloom's actions are analyzed in this methodical, almost detached way.
Wait, so after all this emotional intensity and stream of consciousness experimentation, we get a cold, hard dose of scientific observation. Why does Joyce do that?
It's like this brilliant juxtaposition, right? Yeah. He's playing with our expectations, you know, highlighting the tension between logic and emotion, between the way we try to make sense of the world and the messy reality of human experience.
It sounds like he's saying that even though we crave order and certainty, life is ultimately full of ambiguity and contradiction.
Exactly. And Bloom, even in his own home, is still grappling with uncertainty, with the knowledge of his wife's infidelity. He can't simply erase the day's events, the emotional upheaval he's experienced. Ithaca is about acknowledging that complexity, even amidst the, seemingly simple act of coming home.
Okay, so we've followed Stephen and Bloom on their separate journeys, their brief but significant intersection.
Right.
And now we reach the final episode, Penelope.
Yes.
And this one belongs entirely to Molly Bloom. Why is the book with her voice?
Ending with Molly's perspective is a masterstroke. It's like Joyce is saying that after all this focus on the male experience, it's time to hear the female voice.
Right.
Unfiltered.
Yeah.
Unapologetically.
I know Penelope is famous for being this huge flowing stream of consciousness.
Yeah.
What's going through Molly's mind as she lies in bed next to Bloom?
Everything. It's an outpouring of thoughts, memories, desires, frustrations, reflections. She thinks about her past lovers, her relationship with Bloom, her own sensuality and longing for fulfillment.
Right.
It's raw, intimate, and incredibly powerful.
So it's not just about her reaction to Bloom's day or her infidelity.
Right.
It's about her own life.
Yes.
Her own inner world, which has been largely hidden until this point.
Exactly. Penelope gives Molly agency, a voice that resonates with a depth of feeling and complexity that challenges those patriarchal structures of the time. And it ends, famously, with that single word, yes.
Molly's yes has become so iconic. What's the significance of that one word?
Right.
Ending this sprawling, complex novel.
It's an affirmation of life, of love, of the messy beauty of human experience, right?
Yeah.
Despite the pain, the betrayal, the uncertainties, Molly chooses to embrace it all. It's like a powerful statement of resilience, a reminder that even in darkness,
Right.
there's always the possibility of hope and renewal.
Wow. So after this whirlwind journey through Ulysses, I'm left with a sense of both exhaustion and exhilaration. It's like we've walked miles through the streets of Dublin, dived into the depths of the human psyche, and emerged, like transformed. What would you say to someone who's still hesitant to read Ulysses?
I would say don't be intimidated by it, Approach it with curiosity, a willingness to get lost, and a sense of humor. Ulysses is a challenge, yes, but it's also a gift. It's a book that will stay with you, provoke you, and ultimately enrich your understanding of yourself and the world.
And maybe after this deep dive, you'll feel brave enough to tackle the book yourself. We've given you the map and compass. Now it's up to you to embark on your own Joyce adventure.